One of the other major keys for VBT is that the weight is moved for that exact set. So the VBT takes into account all stressors. And we know that stress is systemic. It doesn't matter what the source of stress is. It's going to affect the body the same way, but not to the same intensity. The same hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis is engaged if it is thought of threat, if it is reliving something that happened in the past, if it is a gunshot going off, a car backfiring, whatever the case may be, it's going to elevate the HPA axis. We're going to look at the velocity profile that Jadovtsev showed, which was the first study that showed a linear relationship between velocity and percentage of 1RM. We'll talk about the feedback for that say in that day, and that enables the use of the optimal weight for that day in that set. So with no further ado, let's get right into Jadovtsev. What we're looking at here is that they did a bench press, and they saw that the average velocity and how it went all the way up to this theoretical load 0. Well, what they did was they plotted the velocity as they went from super light to super heavy, and they saw that they could just continue that line on down to where it would be at 0 velocity. Now, why would that be important? Well, if you're looking at a force velocity power profile, that would prevent you from having to go and get what those maximals are. Now, for the bench press exercise, what they found is that if you multiplied the percentage of 1RM at what you wanted to train at times negative 0.0146 and added 1.7035 on, that would give you the velocity at which you should be training for that given day. So pretty cool, pretty interesting stuff. Now, in that same paper, they showed 3 studies that looked at being able to do your 1RM. And they found that the R squared of it was 0.98 for being able to predict 1RM. So that was 0.871 times the load 0 minus 0.624. That gave you the 1RM of the people. Now, this slide also has got 3 separate studies that they collected data on to show how everything fit in. And we see that the numbers are very, very close to the regression line. There's not a lot of outliers here. So it's fitting in tight, and we can see that, well, the R squared is 0.98, so that it is a very, very high R squared, and that's what we would be looking at and thinking, that yes, there is a relationship between velocity and percentage of 1RM. Now, some of the different systems, they utilize 1RM predictions in there, but they might have cutoffs that are at default. Now, one of the things that I've noticed is that for bench press, it's usually somewhere between 0.18 and 0.12 meters per second. For squat, it's 0.25 to 0.35, and trap bar deadlift 0.22 to 0.32. Some people do move lower or faster than this, and that's because you're an individual. Now, what we do see, though, is, and I'll show this here later with the Sanchez Medina and Gonzalez Badillo study, is that as people age and they continue to train, they're able to utilize lower and lower velocities and still be successful in the bar. It's called gaining neuromuscular efficiency. Well, when somebody is young and weak, they don't have that. But as they grow stronger, they can go slower and still successfully achieve the lift because of that efficiency. So typically what we see is that a freshman will be coming in around 0.8 to 0.2 on the bench press, and by their senior year, they're leaving at 0.12. And likewise, with squat, we see them come in about 0.35, 0.36, leaving somewhere around 0.23 to 0.25. And then the same for the trap bar deadlift. So as they get stronger, they're able to utilize lower velocities because they learn how to strain. Now, I want to point this out, that let's actually flip this. Here's my last workout before my oldest daughter was born. And if we look down, we see that the predicted max is 396, and usually it was about 410. If we look down here, my 345 moved slow. That was because of a training partner's error. I had to wait with the bar on my chest, and then I pressed it up. So regardless, it would normally have been about 405 to 415. Now, to maintain sanity, as most parents do, I continued to work out during, well, my kid was born, but I didn't track anything. I was just getting in to get something done for stress release. So in October of the same year, my estimated max was only 335, so down probably between 60 and 80 pounds. I didn't lose any appreciable muscle mass. I weighed the same. I looked the same, but my strength was vastly different. Now, why is that? Well, it was the additional stressors of having a kid. If you've had a kid, you know that the sleepless nights and other things are tremendously stressful. So with the utilization of that velocity, I saw where I was, and I saw that how much the nervous system was impacted. Now, we're going to go ahead and go forward into this table from Gonzalez Badillo and Sanchez Medina, and we see that they gained 9.3% strength. But we look at the relationship between the velocity and percentage 1RM, we see that it was pretty steady. We look down here on the left column. This is load as percentage of 1RM. So what they did on the pre-test and what they did at the post. We see T1 is pre-test, T2 is post-test. And then over here is the T1 to T2 difference. And we see that it's either 0 or 0.01. Now, what's interesting about this is that you'll notice that there's no negatives. So nobody actually went faster the second trial than they did the first. But we also notice how small the spread is between the two, and that there basically was no difference in this 6-week, 8-week, 10-week, whatever the training protocol was. Unfortunately, I can't remember that at this point in time. But we can see that there, with a short-term time period, it's extremely solid. That whatever they did on the pre-test at 60% for those 0.8 meters per second, that's what they should be doing for their 60% any point in time. Whenever they're moving 0.8 meters per second, it's 60%. If they're having a good day and they're super strong, if they're having a bad day and they're super weak, that is 60% of what their capability is on that given day when they're moving at 0.8 meters per second. But we also notice that not a single number is negative, so nobody got faster. So this goes in to show with that continual decrease that I saw. It's usually about 0.02, 0.03 meters per second per year is what I have typically just anecdotally noticed as far as decreases in velocities go over time. Now we look again. Here are all the data that were in this. And we looked at this as mean propulsive velocity, and we see that the R-squared was 0.98. They also did mean velocity in this. So what's the difference between mean propulsive and mean velocity? Mean propulsive is just the propulsive phase. As soon as the barbell begins to decelerate, they stop and they no longer measure the velocity. So they only are measuring it over the accelerated phase. Now, the mean velocity is of the entire movement. The mean velocity in this was 0.979 instead of 0.98. So we could see that there is a very, very small difference, and it's probably not statistically significant between the velocities that are achieved with those two. And here we go. The claim from this study also showed how much better mean propulsive was than mean velocity. And, I'm not an Einstein, I will admit, but if I take 0.979 and I make that 2 digits instead of 3, that's 0.98. So, again, there was no difference. Now, it does account for the outside stressors. There was a study from Miller et al. In France, and I believe it was 1997, that basically said, hey, if the autonomic nervous system is depressed or excited, motor recruitment will be up or down. ANS is excited, motor recruitment is up, mass moved is up. You're going to be lifting higher weights at the same velocity. When the ANS, autonomic nervous system, is depressed, you have a lower motor recruitment. You're not able to recruit fibers as fast, motor units as fast, so then thus you're going to be using a lower movement. Now this paper is from Jovanovic and Flanagan in their velocity-based training applications in the Australian Journal of Strength and Conditioning. Journal of Australian Strength and Conditioning. Now we see this dotted line across is the pre-cycle tested 1RM, and the blue line is what they did on any given week. So what we see here is that from the dotted line to the blue line, on some days we're 30 kilograms off, and some that we were able to do 30 kilos more. And some days we were able to do 21, 22 kilograms less. And that was based off of the outside stressors. We all know that intuitively, as we've gone into the gym before, we've gotten under the barbell, and for some reason everybody's warm-up set is always the same. It doesn't matter if you're doing 155 pounds for your work sets or 355 pounds for your work sets. You're doing 135 as your warm-up. Well, we all know that 135 sometimes feels super heavy and sometimes it feels super light. And those are just how we know where we're at on any given day. If it feels light, you're probably going to have a good day. The weights are going to feel light. If it feels heavy, you're going to have a rougher day on moving heavier loads. We also see that sometimes the points were right on the line. Now, having been to Las Vegas for several conferences, I know that I'm not a lucky man. That's with one in or two. But I do know that with the utilization of velocity allows me to be right rather than lucky. As we see that there were 2 days that they were lucky. They were right on the line. All the other days, they weren't. So I like to use velocity to dictate load for that reason.